Hey guys, this is Excellent the Maths Doctor and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I thought there are another thing very interesting again guys, which is interpretation of trigonometric functions. So what we're going to be doing is going to be based on this picture. So we have two graphs on top of this Cartesian plane. So we have the graph of gx and the graph of fx. So the statement, it says the graphs of fx and gx are sketched below. Get this two. Okay? Then we must determine, first of all, the amplitude of fx and gx. Amplitude really determine guys. Amplitude is actually a very easy thing, and today people want to come amplitude easy we calculate. Okay, first of all, let me highlight this. The graph of gx, get this one again. This is actually a cos graph, a cosine graph. It's a cosine graph. So this is the graph of gx. Then the other one with the green color, this is the graph of fx. And if you can see it, get this one again. So I'm just highlighting them so that you guys can be able to differentiate between the two graphs. And the graph of fx, let me state that is a sine graph. So the pink one is a cosine graph, then the green one is a sine graph. So we're going to determine the amplitude, but in terms of amplitude, the cosine and the sine, we're not really going to be using that much when it comes to determining the amplitude. Amplitude, we just look at the maximum point and the lowest point, then we divide by 2. Okay, this is the formula. When it comes to, let me write it down. When you're determining amplitude, this is the formula that you need to use. You're going to say amplitude is equal to y max subtract y minimum, then you divide by 2. When I say y max and y minimum, this already tells us we're going to be taking the values from the y-axis. Y max, y minimum. Y represents the y-axis. So it means that the numbers we're going to be looking at, we're going to be taking them from the y-axis. So we're going to take the maximum point and the minimum point for the from the y-axis for each graph. So let's start with graph fx. Graph fx. So the amplitude for graph fx, amplitude is equal to what? We say y max minus y minimum divided by 2. And let's look for the y max field. Let's look at the y max field. So on this graph, the graph here fx get the green one. I say the graph of fx is the green one. And get it guys. So we're going to look at the highest point, the maximum point. We start with y max. So the maximum point on this graph, okay, on graph fx, this is the highest point, level. The highest point. Look at where this point passes. So this is the highest point. This is the highest point on graph f. Clearly, it shows what this 2 get the highest point. So the highest point, 11, which number on the y-axis? 11, 2. Here's 2. This is 2 here. Well, let me remove this so that you guys can see. Like 1 or 2 here. So there's 2 high points, more graph fx. 11, this 2. So which means 2 is the y max for graph f. So it means that more y max, I'm going to write 2. I write 2. So it's about 2 minus, then like a y minimum. Now we're looking for y minimum. So we're still looking at the same graph here, fx. Now we're going to look at the minimum point, meaning the lowest point on the graph. Like a y max is the highest point. The highest point is this one. We say is 2. And because 11 2. Now we look at the lowest point, the y minimum. So the lowest point in this case is this one. This is the lowest point of graph f. So this graph doesn't go lower than this point. And there's also another one here. This 2. And those 2 points, they are on the same level. So these 2 points, on the y-axis, negative 2. So on the y-axis, these 2 lowest points of graph f, negative 2, which means that the y minimum will be what? Will be negative 2. It is the lowest point. Then I'm going to write it down here. So it will be minus -2 because -2 is the y minimum, is the lowest point. -2 you can just put it in brackets like this because around the negative JP. Then divide I got 2. Okay, there's two negatives in the bracket. It shows that we're gonna multiply them. So the total negative times negative you're positive. We multiply the two signs. Negative times negative is positive, so it's going to be like 2 plus 2. The two negative signs, and we're going to have to times them, then they refer positive, then we add. 2 plus 2 is what? Is 4. So the answer is going to be 4 over 2, which is equal to 2. So this is the amplitude of graph F. That one is very easy. Amplitude is not a very difficult thing at all. It's not difficult. As long as you can just recognize the highest point on the graph, the lowest point of the graph. Guys. Okay, now let's go to, okay, we're done with the amplitude of F. Now we're going to the amplitude of GX. And again, we're supposed to look for the amplitude of both of the graphs. Now we have GX. So the amplitude of GX, we use the same formula. GX amplitude is equal to Y max minus Y minimum divided by 2. So what is the Y max for graph G? Okay, graph G, now we're no longer looking at the green graph. The green graph is graph F. That's the one we were looking at right now. So right now we're going to be looking at the pink graph, which is the one that represents graph G. So the highest point on the pink graph, let me do this. Move these dots here. Okay. This is graph, the pink graph is graph G. Sorry, amplitude graph G. Amplitude graph G recalculate, guys. Okay. We are looking for Y max, guys. So Y max seeking on the graph here G, the highest point is this one. That one is still 2. Because graph G, it goes to 2, then so it means that it doesn't go beyond 2. So 2 can get the highest point, get the maximum point on the y-axis for graph G. So it means that the y max for graph G and for graph F, that's 1. So because graph G, Leona, if I more 2. That one, this is 2. So it goes up to 2, then it goes back down. So 2 is the highest point. So it means that I'm going to write here, more y max, I'm going to write 2. Because the maximum point is 2 on the graph. Then we go to y minimum. So the minimum point again. Okay, this is the pink graph, graph G. So the minimum point is here. It's exactly on the y-axis, which means it's equal to 0. On the y-axis. So because this, if I look at the x-axis, on this x-axis here, the lowest point, 11 0 on the y-axis. You get my point? So it means that on the y-axis, the y minimum is going to be what? Is going to be 0. 0. It doesn't go beyond 0. -1, -2. But this graph of G, it doesn't go to -1, it doesn't go to -2. It ends here at 0. It ends here. So it means that 0 is what? Is the minimum point. So I'm going to write 0. So equal about 2 minus 0, then divide by 2. 2 minus 0, it remains as 2. So equal about 2 over 2, which gives us 1. This is the amplitude of the other graph, like this. So amplitude is very, very easy. Then amplitude, then it means that when it comes to calculating the equations, the second question, they say you must calculate the equations of fx and gx. So when it comes to calculating the equations, it's going to be much more easier because amplitude is part of the equations that you're going to calculate. Guys, so now let's go to the equations. And the equations give some that might confuse a lot of people, but I believe after this, after I explain how you write the equations of a certain graph, you're going to be able to understand it very, very well. I'm going to break it down for you guys so that you can understand 100%. Okay, this is B. Let me write it here. Okay, letter B is the equations. This is the question. The equations, we must determine the equations of fx and gx. Let's start with fx. Let's start with fx. Remember, guys, I said fx is sine. I said fx is graph sine. So, okay, The general equation for graph sine is going to be fx equals to a sine x plus q. This is the equation. Your equation must be structured like this for fx. Fx again, don't forget fx is this one, I get the green one. So the green one is the sine, is the graph for sine. Why do I say that? Because the graph for sine most of the time it moves 0. That one. I don't count the negative part of the x-axis. I count from here. So when it comes to the x-axis, most of the time it starts here as 0. It starts like it goes like this. This is the graph of sine. So, but it depends on the amplitude. If maybe the amplitude is higher, then whichever item more 0. I mean not the amplitude, what is it? Q. Q. So when Q is then it means that it's possible for the graph here sine it can start like a bit higher, maybe 1 or 2, depending on what is the value of Q. So here, so here I said fx is equal to a sine x plus q. First of all, let's talk about a. A is what? A represents the amplitude. And get it, guys? A represents the amplitude. And the amplitude of fx, already we calculated it. We said the amplitude of fx is what? Is 2. And get this is fx. Amplitude of fx is 2. So because the amplitude of fx is 2, we already know that our a is equal to 2 because a represents amplitude. So we are done with amplitude. Then as for q, we are talking about the translation of the graph. I get translation of the graph. What do I mean? I mean they take like the original graph here, sine x, maybe they move it 2 units upwards, for example, or 1 unit downwards, like they move it up and down, up and down. That's the translation of the graph. So here we're going to check the translation of the graph. Okay, a general equation. Let me say the standard sine graph, the graph of fx, it starts at 0. I said that before. If you have the graph of sine like this, I said the standard graph of sine starts at 0. So because it starts at 0, there was no translation. And get like Q, it represents the translation. It means that there was no translation. If there was no translation, is equal to 0. If there was a translation, this graph here sine, it wasn't going to start at 0. So the standard equation is started at 0. So if it's already at 0, it means that they didn't translate it. But if it started more 1 maybe or more 2, I'm not talking about this negative side. I'm starting from here to that side. So if they started more 1 or more 2, then we're going to say they translated it upwards maybe once, 1 unit or 2 unit. But since it was 0, the graph of f, it means that it was not translated because it is the standard sine graph. So it is structured in a way more longer. It shows that there was no translation that took place here. So it means that our q is 0 because there was no translation. Guys, so the graph here G fx is going to be, I said a k 2 is the amplitude. So it's going to be fx equals to 2 sine x, right? Then plus what? Plus 0. If it's plus 0, then I don't have to write it. It's going to be 2 sine x. The q is what? Is 0. So we're not going to write it. Like one. And the q is 0 because I said there's no translation. Then this is the graph of fx FLH. Now let's look at the graph of gx. For the graph of gx, the graph of gx is the cosine. Is the cosine graph. Is this one, the pink one, is the cosine graph. It's not the sine graph, this one. The cosine graph always starts somewhere like this. It goes like this. That one. I'm looking at this part only. So it goes like this. Always. This is how the cosine graph is structured. Then this one I said, this one is the sine graph. It starts here. It goes like this. So now we're looking at this one, which is the cosine graph. The cosine graph, we're going to say gx. Okay, let me just double check this one. I just want to make sure before I write it. Okay, it's gx equals to a cos x plus q is the same as this one. A cos x plus q, right? Now, a, I say it's amplitude. Like a graph here, the cosine, even when it comes to the cosine graph, a is still the amplitude. And our amplitude in this case for gx is what? It's 1. We calculated it to be 1. So since it's 1, we cannot write 1 cos x. Remember, coefficient when it's 1, you don't write it. So the amplitude is 1. But we cannot write gx equals to 1 cos x. No, we cannot write the 1. If it's 1, you just write cos. Because the coefficient of 1, remember, we don't write it anchor. So we just write gx equals to cos x because the amplitude is 1. Then let's look for q. Okay, q, when it comes to cosine, the q doesn't start at 0. When it comes to a cosine graph, the standard cosine graph, the graph, it doesn't start at 0. It starts at 1. Guys. So Reisa started at 0 is not a surprise because the standard cosine graph, it doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. Guys. So if it starts at 1, the thing you might ask yourself, okay, now if you look at our graph here, cosine, it starts at 2, it doesn't start at 1. Guys. So why 2 they didn't start it at 1. So they didn't start it according to the standard cosine graph, meaning that they translated it 1 unit upwards. By pushing from 1, then by Shagodimka 1 unit, because it should start at 1 because that's the standard cosine graph. So if it starts at 2, it means that they took it from 1, then they brought it to 2. So they added another 1. They took it 1 unit upwards. So it means that our q is 1. Our q, I said, is the translation part. When you take it 1 unit upwards or downwards, so it means that our q is equal to 1 because they translated it. They took it from 1, then they grab their starting point. They took it from 1, then it's now at 2. It started at 2. So they took it 1 unit upwards. So our q is equal to 1. So our graph is going to be gx is equal to cos x plus 1. This is the graph for gx. Then you're done with the equations. Slide 1. So these equations, they're not really difficult. It just requires you to know the meaning of certain values. Like a, it means amplitude. So if you know that means amplitude, then you know what to find its value. You just calculate the amplitude of the graph, then you got the answer. Then for q is the translation. So you must know the standard graphs of the sine and the cosine of each graph. So each type of a trig graph, you must know the standard graph for that particular, whether it's a cosine or it's a sine. You must know the standard formation, the standard graph of the sine or of the cosine or of the tan, just like that. Then if you know the standard graph, then it means that you're going to know whether it was translated or it wasn't translated. So this cosine graph was translated 1 unit upwards. We know that it should start at 1 because that's the standard equation of the cosine. But because it started at 2, it means that they took it 1 unit upwards. So that's how we know that q is plus 1. Then we're done. Then I think we can leave it here for today, guys. And then I'm going to keep posting more videos for you, and so that you can get more knowledge when it comes to this stuff. And trigonometry, I decided to do it because I know that it's difficult for a whole lot of people, but from now you're going to understand it. And another thing that I mustn't forget, I talked about already, I posted this on TikTok, right? So let me talk about it here on this platform as well, so that as many people as possible can be part of the conference that I'm going to talk about now. So I'm going to have a maths conference, and it's going to be held in the city of Johannesburg in Randburg, right? So this conference, as I've explained before, is for the grade 10s up to grade 12s, and for each grade we only allow a maximum of 50 students, right? So we only allow 50 students for each grade, and it's going to be happening from the 2nd to the 4th of October. So each grade is going to have its own day. The 2nd is going to be the grade 10s, then the 3rd the grade 11s, the 4th the grade 12s, just like that. So if you feel that you're interested and you want to prepare yourself for the coming November exams, so this thing is going to be taking place after the school holidays, right? So after we close for term 3, I made this so that people can prepare themselves for the coming term 4 for November, which is going to include everything, all the topics that from term 1. So that's why I decided to do it. And because I know what is going to take us to cover up a lot of difficult topics and everything like that, I decided that for each grade I'm going to do like a maximum of 6 hours. So for each day, for each grade, you're gonna have a 6-hour session, but we're gonna have breaks in between. And get it, guys? So maybe we're gonna have 2 hours, then a break, 2 hours, then break, then another 2 hours, and there are going to be refreshments in between, so you don't have to worry about being there the whole day. So yeah, I can say that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please like and subscribe to this page, and make sure that you watch more videos so that you can always be updated when it comes to mathematics. And another thing, if you're interested in the maths conference, you can contact me on my number 0817031197 so that you can get more details. Okay, if you contact this number, then you can get more details on how to book for your seat, right? How to book for you to be part of the session, and what the payments are, the requirements, and everything like that. So thank you guys for watching this video. Bye.